Welcome to the worldwide teach-in on climate and justice.
Bienvenue à la conférence mondiale éducative sur le climat et la justice.
Bem-vindo ao encontro participativo global sobre clima e justiça.
Today, we are coming together globally to share our concern for the climate crisis, for climate justice, and to find solutions. We understand that carbon pollution is causing the planet to heat up. We see the fires and floods, the droughts and crop failures. This teach-in will help us all move from despair about this to determination together to change the future. Why climate and justice? Global warming is profoundly unjust. People in low-income communities are already suffering the most as the planet heats up. In the last year, tens of millions of people have been forced to leave their homes by climate change, more refugees than from conflict and violence combined. We can stop this. We can stabilize the climate, and in doing so, create jobs and opportunities for all in a new green economy. What will it take? Our hard work and the courage to face it.
It's not really that bad.
Oh, yeah, it is.
Climate change, it's pretty close to home for South Carolina.
From the UK's wettest February on record to raging wildfires in California.
These winds die down. This fire is unstoppable.
Ferocious fires scorch terrain as Earth
Water
heats.
shortages forcing more than 13 million people to have to boil their water before they can use it. Marcus Moore.
It can take air out of my little brother's lungs.
What if it submerges my Bangladeshi land of love, magic, stories, and songs?
I'm afraid my hands can do nothing to stop the downpour.
I'm afraid it will leave us alone in a world of concrete and plastic.
Groom Gaia into a vacant void.
It will take the green and leave us in the dark.
I'm afraid it will bring out the worst in people.
Uprooting our families and communities.
Leaving our children to an irreversible nightmare.
Taking the beauty of each season from us.
Causing untold suffering that could have been prevented.
I am afraid.
I'm afraid.
I'm afraid.
I'm afraid.
I'm afraid.
I'm afraid. What are we being taught?
What are they teaching us?
Economics, literature, math, engineering, history, music.
What meaning do they hold if our climate swallows us whole?
I can be courageous.
I can be courageous.
I can use my voice and passion, keep fighting even on the days it feels hopeless.
I can fight for my people.
I can hold on to the beauty we still have.
I can save our land against this man-made havoc.
I can be a voice for the sky, the soil, and the sea.
I can make a good future for our next generation.
I can stand up, even when it feels easier to sit down.
I can love my brothers and sisters and protect their lives, because we have the same mother, the great Mother Earth.
I can be louder than polluters that try to silence life.
I can do my part and lead others around me to do better.
I can ask my teacher to make climate.
I can ask my teacher to make climate a class.
Make climate a class.
To make climate a class.
Make climate a class.
All right, very powerful video. So welcome again to the UW-Madison teach-in on climate and justice. So excited to gather with you all while thousands of other communities around the world are gathering as well. So my name is Scott Williams. I'm the Research and Education Coordinator at the Wisconsin Energy Institute and one of the co-organizers of this event. Before we begin the talk, I want to take a moment to remember where we are. UW-Madison occupies ancestral lands of the Ho-Chunk Nation, a place their nation has called Dejop since time immemorial. And in 1832 treaty, the Ho-Chunk people were forced to cede this territory. Decades of ethnic cleansing followed when both the federal and state government repeatedly but unsuccessfully sought to forcibly remove the Ho-Chunk from Wisconsin. We acknowledge the forced removal of the Ho-Chunk people and honor their legacy of resistance and resilience. This history of colonization informs our shared future of collaboration and innovation, and we recognize and want to amplify how tribal nations in Wisconsin and around the world are doing some of the most important and leading work in transitioning away from fossil fuels toward a sustainable, resilient, and just future. So we show up to this event tonight for unique reasons. Many of you are longtime climate activists. Maybe you wanted to learn about what climate action is happening on campus, or maybe you just want a free snack from the Electric Eats food truck. No matter what your reasons, we're so glad you're here because we know that when it comes to climate change, the solutions already exist. We know it will take now. What it will take now is all of us, with our unique skills and interests, working together to stabilize the climate and create an equitable world. So this evening offers the chance for us to learn from and with each other across disciplines and roles on campus. There are 2 sessions of 2 concurrent panels with a snack break in between taking place in this room and in room 1163 down the hall. And then we'll have a plenary session about climate action on campus back in this room. And then closing with some small group conversations in the atrium. So this event is the kickoff of a month of amazing sustainability events taking place on campus. And we encourage you to make the most of our time together this evening. Please ask big questions of these expert panelists, share ideas with each other, introduce yourself to somebody new. Let's make a community that will advance climate justice at UW-Madison and around the world. And now for our first session on food justice and climate change, I'd like to introduce the moderator for our concurrent session. Brittany Bondi is a PhD student in environment and resources and also in the graduate certificate in energy analysis and policy. So welcome.
Hi everyone, is my mic working okay? Okay, perfect. Thank you all for coming to today's panel on food justice and climate change. I have the wonderful honor of introducing our panelists tonight. Starting from, I believe it's your right to my left. I'm sorry if that direction is incorrect. But we have Anna Fujisato, who is a PhD student in the Environment and Resources program, as well as a research assistant in Dr. Risman's People, Institutions, and Ecosystems, or PI lab. Next, we have Michael Bell, professor of community and environmental sociology here at UW-Madison. Next to him is Michel Wattiaux, who is the professor of dairy systems management, as well as an interim director for the Center for Integrated Agricultural Systems, CIAS. And then finally, we have Alfonso Morales, professor of planning and landscape architecture. We'll start out today's panel by allowing each of our panelists to give a 5-minute introduction to their work and specialties. I'll then begin asking a few pre-written questions to each to the panelists as a whole. But the primary point of this panel is to allow the audience to have Q&A. So please start thinking of questions to ask, because about 20 minutes or so is when we'll begin the question and answer part of this panel. And to start, I will allow Anna to begin her introductory remarks.
Okay. Switch at the very bottom.
Can you all hear me? Can you hear me? Yes? Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for that introduction. My name is Anna, and I'm a PhD student. And my current work is pretty interdisciplinary, but I'm primarily trained as a cultural anthropologist. So my research interests really lie in the intersection of food, identity, and justice. And through much of my work, as Brittany said, with the Grassland 2.0 project, which, by the way, is an interdisciplinary USDA-funded project that headed by Randy Jackson and Michael Bell and Adina Resman and many others. I've been researching how to create a just transition towards more perennially based animal agriculture in the upper Midwest. And so over the past year and a half, another colleague and I, Erin Lowe, who is also a graduate student in Nelson, we have been interviewing folks across the Midwest. We've talked to over 100 people, asking them about barriers and opportunities, benefits and drawbacks to grass-based systems, and trying to understand how people are mobilizing to transition to them, how particularly communities of color are navigating the challenges of that transition within this conventional agricultural system that reproduces a racial caste system. So, how folks are working to change that, what policies and governance systems are most supportive to those systemic changes. So part of my work is more regional and more systems level, but what's also really important to me is to be able to support the efforts that are happening on the ground through storytelling and by communicating the struggles, but most importantly, the successes of many farmers and allies. So we've collected a lot of stories from across the region, but I just wanted to share about one group in particular that I work most closely with. They're a group in southeast Minnesota. It's a group led by Reginaldo Haslet Marroquin, Diane Beck, Tony Wells, Wilbur de la Rosa, a really amazing group of folks through an organization called Regenerative Agriculture Alliance. And they have this vision for a more just food system that they're making happen by organizing farmers at the grassroots level and bringing in funders and other partners in Minnesota and also, across the Midwest, also in Wisconsin, as well as internationally. And they're organizing around what they're calling tree-range chicken or regenerative poultry. And they produce this poultry under a canopy of trees and woody perennials, including hazelnuts, sugar maples, oak. And it's really a way to mimic the natural environment, the jungle environment of the chicken. So it's really good for the animal, it's good for the soil, it's good for the ecosystem, and really good for the farmers for a host of different reasons. They're really committed to implementing indigenous agricultural practices that are really based on working within natural systems and favoring biodiversity and climate and community resilience. So as much as their first step is to sell chicken, what they're doing on the farm, what they're doing on the landscape, means that the farmers will be producing a lot of different crops. And, having those diversified operations, which, are really positive for environmental outcomes, but also support farmers economically through the sale or trade of more than just one good. So I've been working with them in more of an evaluation role, helping them synthesize the progress that they're making so far and helping them collect, stories from across their farmer network. And so just to tell you a little bit more about the farmers, and then I'll wrap up. Some of the farmers are originally from different countries in Central America, including Mexico, El Salvador, Guatemala. And so aside from their shared passion for agriculture, they really come from diverse backgrounds and have different experiences and expertise in agriculture. Others who are part of the collective are white farmers whose families have been in the Midwest for several generations, as well as indigenous folks who from the Midwest that have been here for whose communities have been here for thousands of years. So it's really a diverse group of people in more ways than one. And what's really exciting is that they converge on a vision for a just food system that seeks to be in harmony rather than to be extractive. And I think that as we think about these really big concepts of food justice and climate change, I think it's important to center the stories of local community members, of the things that folks are doing right now, and coming together and organizing. Because as a whole, they bring together a tremendous amount of knowledge from different knowledge systems and ways of viewing the world, as well as long histories of resistance and strength, resources and skills that are really crucial to making big changes in agriculture, big changes that we need. And even maybe a little bit more broadly and a little more abstractly, changing the ways that we relate to each other and relate to the earth.
Yeah, thank you, Anna. Yeah, go ahead, Dr. Michael Bell.
Thanks, Anna. That was great. So rather than talking about my work, I want to talk about work. Food and farming is work. It's essential work. It's as essential to our well-being as health care and child care. Maybe we should speak of food care too. And by that I would mean the essential ways that we care for one another through care for the land and care for its bounty. Like that tree range chicken project you were talking about. But have you noticed something about essential work? One would think that the more essential work is, the more the folks that do it would get paid. But in reality, it's usually just the reverse. The essential work of care, of health care, child care, food care, it's often difficult and unpleasant. It's hard work. And we're often told that hard work should be the most rewarded. Right, that's the basic principle of meritocracy, isn't it? But that's not how work works. The hardest work is typically done by those with the least options, not those who are paid the most. In fact, the more you get paid, the easier your work likely is. Now consider what I'm suggesting we might call food care. The average farm worker in the U.S. makes $14.62 an hour, according to 2020 figures. Migrant farm workers on H-2A visas average even less, $13.68 an hour. Food service workers in the U.S. get even less than that, even less. They get $12.95 an hour on average. That's mostly restaurant folks who are public-facing or close to it. But let's consider, too, the folks that hardly anyone ever sees, like meat packers. The average meat packer wage, $11.91 an hour. And also consider the folks who chop the lettuce that shows up pre-washed in those nice bags of greens in the cooler case in the supermarket, or that restaurant kitchens open up with a pair of shears moments before you get your side of salad with your pork chop or with your veggie Impossible Burger. And consider, too, the people running the machinery that tortures soybeans and potatoes into Impossible Burger. Then there are the folks driving the trucks that got the soybeans and potatoes to the factory, and then from the factory to the restaurant and the supermarket. And the warehouse workers, and the people unloading the boxes and stocking the shelves and taking your Apple Pay in the checkout line. None of them are getting paid much either. Nor are most farm operators, at least not from their farming. The median farm income in the United States has actually been negative in the last 4 of the last 5 years. What that means is that at least, that median figure, at least half of U.S. farm households have actually lost money on their farming in 4 of the past 5 years. And are forecast to do so again this year, says the USDA. They're surviving on their off-farm income. Now, big farms with big capital, they're doing just fine. Then there are as well the staggering inequalities by race and gender and so many other axes of inequality, and who finds themselves trying to scrape by through the essential work of food care. We have to do better. We have to care for those who are doing food care, and that includes caring for the land itself, the ultimate source of all food care.
Thank you. Is this working?
You might have to keep it really close to your mask.
Oh, okay. All right. Yes. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Anna. Thank you for the invitation to be in this panel. Again, my name is Michel Wattiaux. I'm a professor in the Department of Animal and Dairy Science. And a little bit like Mike, I won't be talking specifically about my disciplinary research. I do actually measure methane emission in dairy cows, you know, one of the big culprits that everybody is really worried about. No question about that. But I would like rather to share with you some of the thought that I've had on 5 different points. I do teach a couple classes this semester. One is called Food Production Systems and Sustainability, and the other one is called Livestock Agriculture and Sustainable Development. So the first question that I would like to address very briefly, and because this is supposed to be action-driven, I'm going to try to be a little bold in my proposal for solution-oriented action here, and try to set the record straight in a few items, I think. So number one, what's really the contribution of of agriculture and food systems to global greenhouse gas emission? There's been a long debates over this, for the last 20 years or so. But one of the recent publications that I do trust quite well, work from the FAO, indicated that when you don't look only at agriculture, that is the production, but you also include the processing, the transportation, the consumption, the storage, and everything that goes into producing the food and consuming the food, globally, it ranges anywhere from 21 to 37%. Okay, but bear with me here. So 31 to 37% of total global worldwide emission is associated with us feeding ourselves. It drops to 18 to 29% if we separate agriculture itself from change in land use. Deforestation may be associated with livestock agriculture in certain parts of the world, but not all parts of the world. Out of that 21 to 37%, you can count 8 to 10 of those units being due to food waste. Food waste, right? So when you go down now to the contribution of production agriculture itself, we are down to about 10% of the entire global greenhouse gas emission associated with what happened on the farms. Okay? So that was number one, the contribution of agriculture to global greenhouse gas emission. The second question that I'd like to raise and talk a little bit about is, so how do we frame the issue of climate change and greenhouse gas emission in the context of, in the context of sustainability? And to me, the answer is to place climate change in the context of the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. Sustainable Development Goal number 13 is take action on the climate. But those Sustainable Development Goals are not standalone 17 different stories. They are all interconnected, right? And so taking action on climate, SDG 13 is highly connected with SDG 7, which is affordable and clean energy for everyone, right? And you can go down the list. SDG 1, no poverty. SDG 2, zero hunger, which is under which actually sustainable agriculture fits in. SDG 5, gender equality and gender issues. This is huge in agriculture. SDG 6, clean water and sanitation. Agriculture has a key role to play there. And the list goes on. Okay, so that's my point here. Think globally when you need to address climate change. And to me, one of the way forward is to put the work that we do in the context of the Sustainable Development Goal. And by the way, the United States today ranked 32 on that index of Sustainable Development Goal in the world. We are far from accomplishing those goals. Number 3, so how do animal agriculture in particular contribute to achieving those goals? Well, for sake of time, I'm not going to go into detail here, but there were, again, recent publications from the World Food Organization and the Food Agriculture Organization of the FAO that really establish the contribution of the livestock agriculture globally towards those Sustainable Development Goals. And livestock agriculture, especially in developing countries, but also in our countries, have key roles to play, again, for all of those goals. The other way forward, I believe, in terms of looking at animal agriculture and how to move it forward, and agriculture in general, crop system, cultivation of the land, with or without animal, is to look at the 10 principles of agroecology. And again, when you look at some of those international organizations, they really look at the 10 principles of agroecology as guidelines for us to follow in order to make the world a more sustainable place to live, a more just place to live, and along those lines. Number 4. Number 4 is to make you think about what goes in the denominator. What do I mean by that? When we talk about carbon footprint, we're looking at a ratio. We're looking at a ratio of gas emission in the numerator, and then there is something in the denominator. And if you're a climate scientist, the denominator is unit of time. It's how much gas goes up in the atmosphere per day, per week, per year, and that's the thing of the highest concern. I'm part of the dairy industry as a scientist working for dairy farmers and the dairy community, and the whole dairy sector has decided that we should really focus on putting amount of milk in the denominator. So it's emission of greenhouse gas per gallons of milk that you buy, right? But think about it. You yourself as a consumer are interested in trying to get the lowest carbon footprint for the product that you're buying, and the producer wants to reduce the carbon emission for the milk that leaves the farm. Those actually could lead to, depending on what your goal is, to different actions, to different plans, okay? So, do we want to reduce emission per unit of time, per unit of input, per unit of output? How about looking at emission per person, right? So what's in the denominator? Think about that. And last, what I like to just make you think about is this whole issue in agriculture about improving it versus transforming it. And I could see how, there are people on both sides of this camp and very adamant about, the system is broken, we need to change it entirely. And then others, that says, no, this is not how we're going to feed 7 billion people by 2050. We need to build on what we know already what to do and continue make our current system more just, more efficient. And my answer to that is we need both. We need to continue to do research the way we've done research, for the last 150 years with the land grant systems. But we need to come up with new ways of creating new knowledge, as the word has been used before, and not rely only and entirely on scientific knowledge being the only valid knowledge for us to move forward. Thank you for your attention.
Yay, team. To further make a joke, we're all well paid. The 3 of us are well paid, okay? Yeah, I know. The three of us, right, are well paid. And delighted to see you again from that talk in Pi. I think you were there, right, when I gave a talk in the pilot. Anyways. So planning and landscape architecture. 30 years ago, 200 elderly people died in Chicago from a massive heat wave, described in the book Heat Wave, and is a harbinger, right, of what we face today. Planning is supposed to help communities mitigate such difficulties by considering a variety of land uses and regulatory opportunities that limit problems. Landscape architecture, as we know, you can look at fallenfruit.org. It's free food, free fruit in various places around the world. Started by an English professor at Occidental. There are ways that in landscape architecture as a profession and its allied professions like botany, horticulture, etc., wildlife ecology, plant pathology, that these allied professions can work together to advance solutions that are actionable by people. When you walk down the street and you see a nice apple and you can pick it because it's in the public right-of-way, that's meaningful. But we got to do things together. I went to engineering hall first, Delilah. Right, Delilah? Yeah. So Delilah and I were in engineering hall wandering around looking for this room. And we walked over here together. Okay? Together. In interaction with each other. And I want to turn to that for a second. Perspective. People's perspectives will vary. Places will vary. Possibilities will vary. But unless you are interacting with people through their perspectives, in their places, with respect to their possibilities, we're falling short. we will insufficiently deploy the creative imagination of the variety of perspectives that we have available to us. So how now I'm going to just, I'll be like an academic and be selfish, right? I created something called the Kaufman Lab 10 years ago to study food systems and marketplaces to advance solutions to food system and marketplace problems. I got to teach with Michel, one of the classes that he's referring to for several years, from which I learned a lot. Michael and I have been colleagues and fellow travelers in this for a long time as well. In that lab, one of the things in my professional life, 25 years of professional life, I've often consulted one-on-one with farmers and farmers markets and different sorts of direct market agriculture thing to advance their perspective, their goals as they understood them. And I said, if I do this one at a time, it's never going to happen. So I created this lab and I created a toolkit, farm2facts.org, to enable farmers market managers around the country and in Canada to look at the data, to be their own citizen scientists, to collect data, to analyze it, to represent it to their stakeholders, and represent the goals of the farmers in their localities, and thus address the carbon footprint just another margin more. We work with 100+ markets around the country, and we're hiring for the summer. What are we hiring? Computer scientists. Remember the video? They teach us about computer science. They teach us about music. They teach us about marketing. We need all those people. In my lab, I hire PhD, master's, and undergraduate students across a variety of disciplines. Computer science coders, right? Marketing people, economics people, right? To do the work that needs to be done to help markets in Petaluma Bounty in California, in Marin County, California, to help them advance their goals. So it is the case that we need to do this across all disenfranchised groups, or all groups franchised or disenfranchised, you might say. And you think about this. Which group of farmers is growing the most? The analysis I've done says the Latinos are growing the most in the country. Happens to be that Farm to Facts is both in Spanish, Hmong, and English. All three languages are represented in that platform to enable folks to do things, to advance, again, the goals in their communities. And we get, and computer scientists, just to do our coding? No. A lot of the possibilities that we have, although they are climate change causers, like server farms, mining Bitcoin, right? What exactly? Thank you for your nod there. It's nasty, right? Whatever the case is, though, technology can support some solutions. It can be solution-oriented. I'm part of a $20 million National Science Foundation Artificial Intelligence Cyber Infrastructure grant, icicle.ai, that seeks to work with the bridges, AI and CI, cyber infrastructure, to smart food sheds, wildlife ecology, and precision agriculture. And so the Farm to Facts platform helps inform that work. And I see a number of different possibilities, but I don't see those possibilities coming true without interaction. Not only thinking to yourself, but thinking out loud with others. And to that purpose, I believe we now turn, right? Okay, thank you for your attention.
Thank you, everybody, for your deeply engaging remarks. Surprisingly, we only have 9 more minutes left of the panel, so I do want to jump straight into the Q&A to see if there are any audience questions that the panelists can answer. So if you raise your hand, we do have someone with a microphone who can come up and give you the microphone. Yep.
I don't need a microphone. We're recording this, so okay.
Let's all be squeaky.
I have sort of a question for Dr. Morales. I came to Madison almost 50 years ago, having spent a year studying layer cake models with Ian McHarg, who said, you got to go out to Wisconsin and meet Phil Lewis.
Oh, son of a gun.
I've spent my career at UW, good or bad. What most we find are disciplines that they tend to concentrate in different locations. But this is a discipline which seems to be worldwide, except somehow hasn't quite taken off yet. Do you have a sense, especially Michael Bell might have some insights in how do you make a cultural create cultural momentum that's pandemic or worldwide?
Sure, real quick. Phil Lewis, deceased member of my department, famous for the Circle City concept for a variety of ways of thinking about regional planning. Really wonderful work. So I think the point that you make, my friend, about momentum is vitally important. And momentum, right, comes from a variety of ways. If we rely on leaders, we're not going anyplace. Our model has to be distributed leadership, as we practice it in my lab. Everybody has to feel like they have a role to play, people to interact with, lessons to learn, processes to engage and advance. It's got to happen together. I mean, there's got to be, and people have to remember that arguments will be moments in good conversations. If you persist, if you fail to persist in interaction, you will get exactly what you have at that point. Mike?
So I think money is very much at the center of a lot of our issues here. But money itself has no value. It has no value. It is value. It has no value. And I think the real issue is we need to learn to value what we value. I'll just leave it at that.
Next question. Drop the mic. Boom, baby.
Hi, thank you. I was in a view, I'd heard somewhere that 40% of food in US goes west, but I think we just got corrected 8 to 10%. How do you see the shift in culture? I was born in a culture where waste food is a sin. I should not be wasting even a small amount of food, and I would be slapped by my parents saying, you should eat that, if you like it or not. But I don't see that cultural thing ingrained here in the US or in the West. So do you think that there is a huge amount of scope in teaching the kids as well as pushing this agenda? At least we could save 8 to 10% of food that we're already wasting. Do you think there is a way that we could teach the kids or put this in curriculum or different ways that the government should look into for policy making as well about saving that, and maybe that might help equity distribution of food and thus save climate, I guess?
Let's go first.
Yeah, I'll go first because I talk about food waste. So the 8 to 10% again is the 8 to 10% of total greenhouse gas emission worldwide, attributed to food waste. Now you're right that in the United States, in terms of amount of food, pounds, about 25, 30, it varies, right? But 30, 35, up to 40% are being wasted, right? Which is 100% correlated with our, lifestyle, American lifestyle, our lifestyle. Now, the question you're asking about, being raised, and having to empty your plate or meter how much you put in your plate before you help yourself, as you help yourself. Well, actually, this is one of the activities that I do with my students in my class. I kind of ask them about their own life experience and what they think, should be the case. Food waste could contribute enormously. It's a loss of efficiency, right? It was produced. It took a lot of input, and then nothing happened to it except it contribute to environmental, pollution and contribute to the injustice of the system. I think, as Mike pointed out, learning to value what it is that we should be valuing. I do feel very, very strong that, unfortunately, a lot of people in the developed world look at food just as something just like everything else, they buy. I have the economic power to do so, and I'm free to decide what I want to do with my money. And if I decide to waste my money on food, or buy and then waste the food, that's my right. That doesn't go along very well with valuing things that are contributing to make the world a better place for all of us. So that's my short answer.
Okay, let's get on this.
Okay, I just have one more thing to add. I think there are many things that we could do at a policy level that the government could do to address this issue. And I guess one thing that comes up for me is the excess food law that New York instituted. And so that requires supermarkets to donate to charity, to donate to food banks, any kind of food that normally they would have thrown out. And it's interesting because in kind of the debate around that and thinking about that, there was this, fear, right, of supermarkets that they were going to lose. That they're going to lose money. And essentially, I think that's also part of the problem, that food is a commodity. And so it's being kind of protected and secured as a commodity, and the access is being restricted so that certain people can make a lot of money. And now I haven't seen numbers from, this law that was implemented in New York. I think that was just a couple of years ago, or maybe a year ago or something. So I don't know how, if it has affected these companies' bottom line, but I really, really doubt it has, because there are a lot of folks who are really in need of food. We have a lot of folks in the U.S. that really need that food, and so rerouting that food that is going to landfills to communities that need it without the exchange of cash, without having food banks, to have to pay for it, or for folks to have to pay for it, is really important.
Can I say something real quick? So one thing real quick is the Harvard, law and regulation. Harvard Food Law and Policy Clinic is I've had several students work at that clinic for summers. They do a lot of work on food waste. Okay, won a job this summer. Sustain Dane has a farmers market internship job. It's a USDA grant that I'm part of that's worried about food waste and food recovery. Okay, look at Sustain Dane.
Here's a little t-shirt slogan for you. Don't waste your taste.
And with that slogan, I do have to wrap up today's panel. Thank you so much to all the panelists for giving wonderful remarks today. If we could give them a round of applause thanking them. If we didn't get to your question, we will be having small group discussions later on at 8 p.m. later today, and hopefully you can engage with this topic a little bit further then.
Thank you. And as we just completed our discussion about food justice, we do have some snacks available in the atrium, so go around the corner and back through. Again, please don't waste food. And then at the end of the event at 8:30, we also will have some meals provided by the Electric Eats food truck from Housing, which is actually doing a lot of work in recovering food to prevent food waste. So please engage with that food at those different times. And we'll be back at 6:30. This session is on climate change and human rights and global policy, and the other room will be global climate wisdom.